America's colleges and universities. Those pastoral environs within which America's best and brightest young people gather to learn and to think and to explore and to be exposed to all kinds of information and ideas which will allow them to construct who they will be as they grow into adulthood. Well, that's what colleges and universities are supposed to be anyhow. They very rarely actually end up being that, but that's what we're sold. That's the bill of goods we're sold when we write those checks for our children to go to universities and colleges, isn't it? But they often fail in that regard. And we recently saw a case where there was at least an attempt from those on campuses and those in the media to restrict such speech, to restrict the opportunity for these young college students to explore varying, diverse opinions and analysis. A couple weeks ago, over at Texas A&M University, there was a guy named Richard Spencer who was scheduled to speak. Now, a lot of you probably have not heard of Richard Spencer. And in truth, had there not been any protesting about him, had there not been any big hoo-ha drummed up about him, he probably would have come and spoke, and maybe a handful of people would have heard him, and he would have come and gone, and it never would have been a big deal. But because some social justice warriors over in College Station got a wild hair up their butt, this thing took on a life of its own. Richard Spencer supposedly is a white supremacist, or at least he is called a white supremacist by those who are protesting him, and certainly by a lot of people in the media. And by the way, when I heard the national media reporting on this, I did not hear them saying Richard Spencer, alleged white supremacist. They just said Richard Spencer, a white supremacist, without offering any backup of that. I found that to be interesting. And don't get me wrong, maybe he is a white supremacist. I don't know. I'm not overly familiar with Mr. Spencer, okay? I will say that. But in any event, he was there to speak at Texas A&M. He had been invited by a former student. And the fact that he was merely speaking was cause for a massive protest on campus and seemed to be cause for national media and journalistic organizations to come down to College Station and report on this ever so important thing. Well, let's look at it. Now, again, I don't know a great deal about Richard Spencer, but I did read a USA Today article in which there was a quote that Spencer had given to KAGS television, where Spencer said this, quote, "Whites will be a minority in America by the year 2050. I often wonder, will the non-white population be as altruistic as the white population has been? Will there be civil rights for whites? Will there be equal opportunity for whites? And I think white people, and it showed with Trump's election, are concerned about their future," end quote. Now, would you consider that quote to be indication of a white supremacist? I would not. Perhaps you would. I actually thought that there was a number of interesting questions in that quote, a number of interesting ideas. He did accurately point out that whites will be a minority in America by the year 2050, and by the way, you can look at any demographic breakdown and any demographic analysis and find that. So that statement is not racist or not white supremacist in and of itself. And he did wonder aloud about what the effect of that would be. Would these other groups, would these other cultures, if and when they take over in this nation, would they end up having the positive altruistic track record that Caucasian Americans have had? I think that's an open question and a worthwhile question. I don't see anything wrong with that statement. And I think those are worthwhile questions to ask, particularly in a college setting where the idea is you're supposed to explore different methods of thought and you are supposed to try to get some grasp on the future and shaping it. I don't see that as a racist statement at all. I see it as a statement questioning the impact of other cultures taking over in America, potentially. And we've made that argument on this show many times, that the supposedly racial issues we have in America are not issues of race at all, they're issues of culture. And culture is something that you choose, no matter what your race is. But when we look at the crime rates among blacks and among minorities, that's a legitimate question to ask. Hey, what's going to happen when some of these minorities become the majority? If what we're seeing out of them now is far less desirable than what we're seeing out of Caucasian Americans as a whole. It's worth asking. And it's worth trying to shape that reality going forward. But in any event, there was a lot of pressure on Texas A&M to deny this Richard Spencer guy the opportunity to speak. Now, to their credit, Texas A&M allowed Spencer to have his presentation. They have a policy over there that anyone can host an event at their public university, and the university cannot cancel the event. And they, to their credit, did not try to find some kind of loophole or some kind of a sneaky way to deny him that opportunity. They stuck with their policy, they stuck with their long-term vision, and he was allowed to speak. Over and above the protestations of social justice warriors and journalists. They upheld their own policy, and I give them a lot of credit for doing so. It seems as we go through time that this is the exception, not the rule in academic America. We see Milo, and I can never pronounce this guy's name, Milo Yiannopoulos. Milo, I'm sorry if I butchered your name. I'm sure I did. But he's one of the most forefront folks on the supposedly the alt-right movement, or what is being termed as the alt-right movement. And he goes from college campus to college campus speaking, and he often runs into issues with groups and universities trying to keep him from speaking. And oftentimes he's successful in overcoming it. Sometimes he's not, but he's out there fighting this battle every day, and others are too. And so we see this determined effort from universities to shut down these kind of ideas, to shut down these discussions, not just to object to the discussions, but to prevent them from happening to start with. We see all kinds of protests and actions in this realm, but why? Because I want to ask you a question. We see people protest folks like Richard Spencer and Milo Yiannopoulos. Sorry. We see all kinds of protests in that realm. But do we ever see people gathering and protesting the Black Studies programs around the country in the various universities? Do we see people trying to shut down those classes? No. Do we see people protesting the women's studies programs in all of these universities? No, you don't. Do we see people protesting the Hispanic student clubs and Asian students clubs and whomever else student clubs that we see around America? No, you don't. You see, what you find at most of our universities is not an environment where varying and different ideas are allowed to be discussed in an open forum and where that discussion and that back and forth is embraced. Instead, you see academics and journalists throwing their weight around in an attempt to prevent certain ideas from seeing the light of day while pushing other ideas. A Richard Spencer and his alt-right beliefs and his supposedly white supremacist beliefs, they are objectionable. They cannot be allowed on the campus. But a Black Studies program, oh, we've got to have that. Oh, we've got to have a women's studies program, when really a Black history program, a Black Studies program is every bit as racist as anything Richard Spencer might have said. A women's studies program is every bit as discriminating against a gender as anything else you'll see. But yet again, what they are doing is they, and by they I mean the American left, I mean academics, I mean social justice warriors, I mean journalists, they are trying to deny us the opportunity to be exposed to diverse ideas and to make up our own minds. Now, I don't know a whole lot about Richard Spencer. I'm not saying I agree with him or I don't, but I at least think that I ought to have the opportunity to hear him out and make up my own mind. But you see, the left doesn't want that. Whether it's a Richard Spencer at Texas A&M, whether it's Milo somewhere else, whether it's these supposedly fake news scandals where they decry the fact that Americans actually went out and found their own information and made the decisions off of it. The root of all of these controversies is that the left in America is no longer in charge. They no longer have a monopoly on information and discussion in America that they used to have. They no longer are able to define what ideas are universally accepted and detested in America, and they can't handle it. It's a new reality, one in which they don't control the discussion, and they can't handle it. Folks, we'll be back with more right here on truthfrequencyradio.com right after this.